I used to love to listen to them when I was a boy. They had some tapes of these that my dad had of like old radio shows.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah, they're just fascinating to listen to.
Isn't that so interesting that used to be the only way that you could hear old stuff?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess you just got to listen to the radio and hopefully they'll play an archive once in a while, or you've got to like have a cassette of it. Or that sort of thing.
Do you remember the movie Cinderella Man?
Oh yeah, Russell Crowe.
Yeah. With about James, what was his name? JJ, the boxer.
JJ the boxer?
Braddock.
Okay.
Braddock. Because I asked my dad, I saw the movie and I said, "Oh, Daddy, this is a great movie you'd love." And I said, "It's about the J.J. Braddock and Max Schnelling fight." He said, "I listened to it on the radio." I said, "No, come on." He said, "I was at my granddaddy's."
Yeah.
He said, "I was sitting in the floor," and he says, "I heard the fight that night."
That's amazing.
Over the radio. So he said that's what they used to do. He said we'd just get around the radio and listen to whatever was,
well, boxing.
Fibber McGee.
I mean, at that point, at that point, boxing was maybe the most popular and listened to sport in America.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I didn't understand that growing up because it was all baseball and that's what you see on TV. But then I remember I watched. It was some kind of what was the sports show they used to have on Sundays? This
Wide World of Sports.
Wide World of Sports. I think it was like either Jim Nance.
The Thrill of Victory.
Somebody was on there and like listing the greatest athletes of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and of course number one was Muhammad Ali, the greatest. And I'm like, I didn't even know who that was.
Really?
No, at that point I was like 6 years old. I'm like, who is Muhammad Ali? I don't even know. Huh. And then
now I remember listening to the Ali Frazier fights on the radio with my dad because they didn't come on television. Of course, you didn't have HBO or any of that
pay-per-view stuff.
That stuff back then, but it was on the radio.
So I finally came to appreciate Ali, and then this one of my favorite Olympic memories because the Olympics were in Atlanta in '96. Mm-hmm. And then they have him light the torch.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that. And he's already got the
Parkinson's.
The Parkinson's. It was just so.
He really had it really bad. Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Did you watch any of the Olympics that just finished up?
I never saw 30 seconds of it. Never saw a bit of it.
You've had too much to do.
I've had too much to do, and we don't watch that much TV. And when we do, it's usually pretty targeted to what we.
That's fair.
We're
kind of the same way.
We sit and read, we just sit there and look at each other.
Yeah.
Can't believe. When did we get old? No.
Well, you got old.
What happened?
Yeah, how did this happen?
How did this happen?
you just wheeze back and forth. That's ridiculous. Well, do you have a favorite Olympic sport? Because we've been having all these debates in the office about, or the debates are forthcoming about which is the greatest Olympic sport. We're gonna have.
The biggest puzzle to me in the Olympics happens to be basketball. When you've got all of these incredible NBA players,
right,
who go and play, and why they don't stomp everybody in the world flat like 160 to 32, I'll never figure out.
Well, I actually know the answer to this.
Okay, well, good.
There's two reasons. One is because now not all of the best NBA players come to the Olympics because different things, injuries, and they all have these other business things they're doing. But the second thing is, you're going to hate this. A bunch of the best NBA players are international now. They go
That's
and play.
True. Yeah.
But the final was between. I'm showing my cards as a basketball nerd. But the final was between USA and France, and 3 of France's starting 5 are in the NBA. Rudy Gobert was one. Brody, who are the other? There's a couple others. I can't. Just make up a French name. Pierre. Yeah, something like that. Just do a lot of. We still allowed to say
Ratatouille. Ratatouille was he?
Yes, Pierre Ratatouille was their starting shooting guard.
You know what? You're exactly right. I've not thought about that. I used to go and watch. Who was the real tall Chinese guy?
Yao Ming.
Yes, I used to see him play when
they'd
come
incredible.
To Dallas. Yeah.
Do you go to Mavericks games?
Oh, my stars. We went to Mavericks games all the time.
You guys see Dirk play?
Dirk all the time.
Oh, man.
We saw Dirk play all the time. Yeah.
That guy was incredible.
He
What a
was
great
incredible.
player.
And you know what? There was a fair amount of humility to the guy. I talked about humility yesterday.
Agreed.
He never was out there showboating or,
I appreciated that about
I
him.
do too.
I remember
I
when
do
they
too.
won the title in 2011. Like he ran off the court because he's like, I didn't want everybody to see me cry because he
Yeah.
was like so
Yeah.
happy about it. It finally came.
Great.
together.
I was there when Finley, Nash, and Nowinski. In fact, Deb's got a jersey signed by Nash, Finley, and
Nash
Nowinski.
was so good.
Those three guys were pretty incredible to watch play.
I love. That was
Nash
a really
was
cool era.
a real ball handler.
Yeah, and Cray won the MVP twice.
And
in a row.
you never realize, what is he, like 6'1" or something?
Yeah, he's real small.
But see, you just said it. You think he is a little leprechaun out there playing
right.
until you get up next to him, and then you think, well, gosh, this guy's pretty tall.
Yeah.
He's 6'1" or whatever. But when you're
Respectfully,
out
I
there
wouldn't
with
think that.
6'9" guys,
Yeah, if I'm talking to those guys, I feel like I'm, finally feels like I found my people.
Yeah,
right. I'm 6'6".
right.
I'm like looking them in the eye.
walk among the trees.
And they're just like, oh, did you play? I'm like, no. The old movie adage is true. White man can't jump.
Yeah, that's
It's just I could not jump, so I just sang that sort of thing. I told you I had a funny story. I had a
Okay.
funny story for you because yesterday, and you finished the message with this, which was only 57 minutes, but who's counting? You finished the message with this yesterday. You were saying, how you got pulled over a few weeks ago in Atlanta. Which that was some of your best work.
It was before I got to Atlanta, but yeah.
That was some of your best
in
work,
Georgia.
by the way, because you refused to tell people how fast you were going. And I'm holding my kids, at the and because they're about asleep because the message was only 57 minutes long, and my wife looks over at me and says. And grabs my arm because we drove to the beach last week, and guess who got pulled over?
Did you get pulled?
Yeah.
You did that just to make me feel good, didn't you?
What?
Did he charge you?
He didn't charge me.
Oh, good.
It
good.
mirrored your story exactly because I'm sitting there, and like he pulls me, and I have to go onto a sidewalk because it's this speed trap, this tiny town in Nowheresville, Alabama, and I pull over. And I just take my sunglasses off, and I'm looking down, and I'm trying to have a moment of silence, but Dora the Explorer is playing too loudly in my ears. And my wife is like, I can't believe this. And I think I was going like 20 over or something like that. But it was like it was maybe the nicest police officer I've ever talked to.
This guy was just a great guy. I don't know why he was so kind to me.
I felt the same way.
Basically, if it was true that I was doing what he said, my fine would have been hefty. I mean, it would have been. He could have carted me off to jail, honestly. But he was just the nicest guy. And he just did exactly what he said. I saved you.
I'm pretty sure that because I was looking at him and my wife's in the passenger. I'm pretty sure that she.
I
mouthed
would
to
not
him.
even look at Debbie.
I couldn't do it. What you said was exactly right because I was like, I wasn't worried about the police. I wasn't worried about the kids. I wasn't even worried about the fine. I was worried about my wife just being mad at me.
Yeah.
But it was a good teaching moment because the kids were like, why were you saying yes sir and no sir and all this to the? And I said because when a police officer tells you to do anything, you say yes sir and you do it.
Yeah.
So I was trying
Just do it. Don't argue with them. Good night.
Yeah, I was
Don't
trying
argue
to
with them.
teach him a little bit.
So I don't know why the guy, but man, he came back and he just kind of looked up and he nodded. That old big brim on that hat.
That's
He just
good.
nodded over there. He said, "You can't see him, but that state trooper sitting right over there." He said, "I saved you
That
from
was
that."
a perfect illustration because that's like the whole thing that's happening in Esther.
I started to say, "Well, you were pretty well hidden yourself." Right. He may be hidden, but you were pretty well hidden too. All I saw was lights coming up behind me.
Well, I'm glad you got the nice guy. I'm glad.
He was an incredibly nice guy. Yeah.
So you were talking about people being hidden. You're talking. So God, we see how God is hidden in a lot of ways in Esther's. It's like going to
Esther.
Walmart's. It's the books of Esther's. Next, we're going to Revelations and then to the Psalms. All right.
Psalms.
So there's two things that I want before we get into the text.
I had a guy come up to me and ask me that years ago, my first church in the country. He said, "Preacher, do you know over there in the book of Plasms?" Good old country boy.
It's a little bit before Malachi.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, Esther, the book of Esther. Is that how you pronounce it? Esther with a T.
Esther.
We've really gotten off the. This is why they don't let us in the same room anymore. Our producer Joanna is giving me this signal, which I think means that she wants to be on the show. So you mentioned this in passing, and you were just like, anyway, it's like the Essenes would say, and you start talking about the Essenes like everybody knows. People don't know who the Essenes are.
Well, now that you say it, I guess maybe that was a goof on my part. The
It's not a
Essenes
goof.
were a community down by the Dead Sea. They were almost like monks,
Right.
but they had families. But they were off by themselves. They had separated themselves off. There are some scholars that think that John the Baptist had been part of the Essenes.
That's right. Yeah, that is theorized.
He's down in that area. He kind of holds to that separated lifestyle, and that's who they were. They were very separated, off to themselves, very conservative. They were looking for the Messiah to come.
Yeah. Well, and they were very, very astute about copying the books
They
of the
were
law.
and that's where all the Dead Sea Scrolls
Right.
are found.
So
in that
that's
area.
what a lot of people don't know is that it's that group of people that preserved the scriptures so well that
Yeah. They buried them when the Romans were coming. That's when they hit them on the caves and buried them. It was when Rome, because you had the 10th and the 12th and the 15th Legion, I believe, those three legions that marched down out of Jerusalem down that way to Masada, to camp around Masada. After the city of Jerusalem had fallen, they went down there to take the Jews that had taken the palace of Herod on top of Masada.
But that wasn't the Essenes.
No, that
was
was
like
not the Essenes, but the
Zealots or
Essenes knew the
something like that.
Romans were coming, and they were just the Romans were they were so mad, they were
They're just
obliterating
killing everybody.
everything in their path. And so they went and they buried and they hid these scrolls.
And they
that's
weren't
how
discovered for 1,800 years or so.
Yeah,
That's
that's
amazing.
right. It's considered to be the greatest find in history, really.
Well, and I guess we should,
Almost the whole scroll of Isaiah is preserved.
it's amazing. I remember going to see it in Washington D.C. like when it was on tour. I think I was like 9 years old or something like that.
How about that? I've seen it, but I've always seen it in Israel, in Jerusalem. It's in the
You win as
museum.
usual.
It's in the Jerusalem Museum there.
So the Essenes preserve it, but that was the interesting bit of trivia is that there's so much of what we know as the Old Testament is preserved.
Yeah.
And Esther is just conspicuously absent. It's not among
The
any of those.
Essenes, they didn't find the scroll. That's the one thing they did not find was a scroll of Esther.
So it's not a guarantee that they didn't copy it, but
I
it
bet they
wasn't-
did not. I'm saying that they did not.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking, knowing how conservative they were and how rigid they were, because it doesn't mention the name of God, I would say they did not bother with it.
Yeah, because that's another bit of trivia about the Essenes is that like before they would even write the Tetragrammaton, is that what it's called? Before they would write the Yahweh, they would go and completely ritually cleanse themselves,
Yeah.
and then they would go back and write it, and then every time they would come, I mean, you're talking about that. This is how serious they are about the name of God.
Yeah.
So this
And they
doesn't
have
appear in
found,
Esther.
they've uncovered those mikvahs down
It's
there.
the baptismals. Yeah,
the-
that's
where
incredible.
they would go and wash themselves, and they would write the name of God. They would take the quill at that point in time, or whatever they were using, and they would burn it so that it would never
Oh,
write
I didn't know
anything.
that part.
Yeah, they would burn it so that it would never be used to write anything else.
must have taken so long.
Don't you know? Have you seen
It'd
that
take it
scroll
forever.
of Joshua? That one section of Joshua I've got. You cannot
it
imagine
says the
how
Lord so many
meticulous they were in writing this. They counted every letter.
Yes.
They counted, how many olives, how many bets, how many gimels on a page, and they would come to the central letter, And they would count it backwards from there and then forwards from there. They had so many ways that they would know. And if there was one letter out of place in a scroll, they would just burn the whole scroll.
Yeah, and start over.
They would not go in and correct it. They would just burn the whole thing.
Now, are there
Don't you know that?
I mean, like, I just thinking about it boggles the mind, like the patience.
Aren't you glad you have a delete button on your computer?
It's very nice.
Yeah.
It's very nice. Yeah. We can copy, paste, we can edit, all these sorts of things.
The greatest thing in the world to me now is the footnote device. All you got to go up is just click a button and it automatically numbers and puts it down there, draws the line, and you can type your footnote.
Yeah. You're on better terms with Kate Turabian now because of that.
Don't mention her.
Don't mention she who must not
She who will not be named.
Is she still alive?
No.
Oh,
she's,
okay. All right.
She's been dead.
She who must not. She
and
who must
still
not
making. She's from the grave.
From the grave. She's still
makes my
bothering
life
with
miserable.
Stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go into it. They can look up who that is. If you missed the name, just rewind the podcast and.
Kate Turabian.
I'm not going to. I think you said it. Wow, you hypocrite.
Yeah,
you went back and said.
I said
went
it.
back and said the name. So you said something interesting about chapter. I'm getting into the minutia here. I can tell that you're trying to move me along.
Well,
But I wanted to say you went and did this. You went to chapter 2, verse 3, and you said the Jewish grammarians have found that these are the 3 consonants that make up the name of Satan, and they do it 2 verses in a row.
Yeah.
And all I could think about was the whole concept of like the 4 levels of Hebrew interpretation, and I wrote it down for you. You remember this, right?
Okay.
Because I know that I'm the only Hebrew scholar amongst the two of us, but I'm going to give this to you. There's Peshat, which is the plain meaning of the Hebrew, as you'll recall when I told you about it. Remez, which is
I'm going to school right
the
now.
hint. It's just, you know all this.
The classroom of
I
Kirkwood.
know that you've read this before.
No,
I'm going to stop.
Go ahead. No, you're telling me something I have long forgotten.
Then there's the Remez, which is the hint. That's like the next level.
Remez.
Right? And then there's the Drash, which, and then you get Midrash.
Yeah.
That's the hidden meaning. So you have the hinted meaning, you have hidden meaning, and then there's the Sod, the secret meaning.
Yeah.
The secret. And so I felt like you're in like the Midrash or the Sod area with the chapter, and maybe you've got something here.
No, I don't. I'm going to just honestly. I think it's just a fluke. I think I just wanted to impress on everybody how utterly odd it is that nothing of God is in the book of Esther.
It really, it's very strange. Well, and even the way that I loved what you did with the opening, because you're even talking about like usually when you have this Hebrew formula to open a passage, it means that God is absent, that something is about to happen.
Something disastrous is about to happen.
You go over to the piano, you play the Jaws theme. That was the first time you played piano in a sermon too.
I started to break out in, a little bit of rock and roll.
Okay.
But I didn't.
Yeah, well, when you do it, make sure you give me the old time rock.
The old time rock and roll.
Not the new time stuff. But you said so. It's very foreboding what is about to happen. So I didn't know that, like the foreshadowing that's there already. It
starts out that way. It's kind of like we tell a story. Once upon a time. Well, this one is
came upon a place.
At that place, at that time, or it came to in those days. It's just kind of interesting that 5 times in the Old Testament that phrase is used, and it's every time
it's not good.
It just foretells something disastrous is coming.
So you finish things up by giving us some lessons from the life of King Xerxes, who called himself the King of Kings, and obviously those were helpful applications. That's kind of a callback. We mentioned it earlier. He was just too prideful. Pride was ultimately his downfall. Friend of the show, now a mutual friend, our drummer friend John Claxton, said he wanted to know more about the various battles that were fought.
Yeah.
So just
Well,
take 35 minutes or so.
His father, Darius the Great, had fought and lost the battle at Marathon. He had invaded Greece and came back to raise another army to go back again to invade Greece, which is funny. The Achaemenid Empire is going to end with years and years after Xerxes with the rise of Alexander the Great. And he's going to go down to Persia, and he is going to put a terrible whooping on them. And will conquer them.
Okay.
The Persians have always wanted to conquer the Greeks. And it's the Greeks turns around. The Greeks turn around and they conquer with Alexander the Great. They conquer the Persians. It's another Darius on down who come out. You remember the Macedonians had never seen elephants until they get down to Persia, and here comes the Persian army, and right out front they've got these elephants.
That's scary. Well,
they'd never seen. They had no clue what an elephant was. They see this huge animal, they don't know what to do. But here comes Alexander the Great. Brilliant military mind.
Goes over the mountains.
You know what they do? He goes up and he gets these hoplites, these long spears, and these spearmen.
Yes.
And they throw these spears at the feet of the elephants. And they hit the feet of the elephant, and the elephants turn around and start stomping the Persians.
Oh, my goodness.
So, they did. It was not not a very it was not a very wise use of their plan backfired. They thought it would terrify the Greeks, and they would just run through the Greek lines. But they figured out, man, if we stick them in the foot with a spear, they'll turn around and stomp everybody.
The most interesting thing to me about Alexander the Great is that he died when he was like 27?
33.
So he
accomplished, same age as Christ.
It's just insane how much he accomplished and conquered.
His military mind was just unbelievable. That's why the Romans all just gushed over the Greeks and loved the Greeks. And really, their military formation came from Alexander and his father, Philip of Macedon.
But this is all after Alexander the Great's after Esther.
Because he
comes
that's
back
several hundred years later, or a little over 100 years later.
Well, I think that's why it was kind of interesting. I think that and that's why John was saying that to me yesterday, and I felt the same way because seeing, and you know this. That's why he told it to us yesterday, and everybody needs to go back and listen to this message. It grounds it in the actual history.
Yeah,
like this is not. This isn't
a fairy tale. No, this is actual history right here. And the thing is, Xerxes, when he comes, he goes and fights because I'm convinced that's what this, and most all commentators are. That's what's taking place in the first chapters. This is a war planning coalition, and he's going to go off to fight the Greeks. They win the battle at Thermopylae. They eventually kill the 300, and they go on and they burn Athens. In fact, I'm going to be in Athens in a little less than 2 months, I think. They burn the city of Athens. They burn the Acropolis.
Wow.
What's on the Acropolis? They burn it. They burn the place. They take it. But there is a huge sea battle at Salamis, and the Greeks defeat the Persians at Salamis, and he has to retreat. He's afraid he's going to be cut off, that the Greeks are going to get around, cut him off from going back across the Hellespont, the Dardanelles, and so he retreats.
Xerxes
does. And he goes back, and he basically kind of licks his wounds until he dies, until he's murdered. He's assassinated.
Yeah.
And he goes back and just tends to the affairs of state.
Yeah. We went and saw I think I told you this. We went and saw the Sight and Sound production of Esther, Queen Esther.
Yeah.
Sight and Sound's that just amazing drama production company, I guess stage production company, based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we saw that, and I thought they did a great job of illustrating that. If I need to find a link and see if there's a way you can watch it. You probably have to pay if you can watch it online. Where at the beginning, you see that what he's actually doing here they follow the commentaries as well, and they say he's planning out these guys, planning the conquest of the Greeks, and then and he actually goes away to battle, and it's when he comes back that he selects his wife, which I don't know if that's exactly in keeping with this.
There's so much of the history that it's difficult to figure out. Did he do some have even said that this is the banquet that he throws after he gets back from Greece.
Oh, okay.
But why would you throw a 180-day
you should be tired after
banquet, after you come back in retreat, in defeat? I think he dies. I think this happens after Esther, when he invades Greece. I think it happens after. And I think that's why he is assassinated, is because they see him now as weak, and they pick a time and they assassinate him.
Which that was fairly common.
Yeah.
One
of the things I did not say yesterday, and I'm glad I get the chance, it just hit my mind, is this. Esther is unique in all of history, in all of recorded history, in that Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi tell us what happened to the remnant that goes back to Israel. Nobody tells us anything about what's going on with the Jews in Babylon and Persia.
And that was the majority.
That is Esther. That is the uniqueness of Esther. And I forgot to say it yesterday. That's uniqueness of Esther is that she, or the book, gives us a picture of what's going on with the Jews back in captivity, or where they used to be captive. They're no longer captive now. While all of the attention generally is on that group that goes back, that remnant that goes back into Israel.
Well, I thought you did a good job of showing how the Lord was merciful, even though they sinfully assimilated with the culture. They'd become part of the culture. They'd sort of embrace it as their own. They're not necessarily praying. Obviously, they're doing intermarrying, which was forbidden in the law, and yet the Lord regards them, and yet the Lord seeks after them. I think that's a beautiful application.
It's a great picture of what does God do with very apathetic, marginal, uncommitted believers. He still loves them. Now, that's hard for us, and it's hard to preach, but I want to tell you something. It is true.
Of course it's
because
true.
You don't want somebody to sit out there and say, well, hey, then I don't have to do much of anything. Well, if that's your... If that's your takeaway on it, you probably need to go and check your salvation. But we're coming. I'm going to preach the rest of chapter 1 Sunday, and the rest of chapter 1 really is for Jews. It is comedy.
Yeah, right on.
That's comedy.
Really fun. Queen Vashti's refusal.
Yes. Here, this guy rules the world, and his wife sends back, nah. Hey, did y'all see that thing on the Queen where she said, nah? And they made such a big blow up about it. Here's the Queen
of
England.
Recently?
Yeah. That she was being painted, and the painter asked, does it she said, I can see myself aging. And he said, does that bother you? And she just goes, nah. Well, you don't expect the Queen of England to say that. Well, that's what Vashti does. Vashti sends back the word, nah. Forget it.
Nah.
There are all kind of just bizarre reasons as to why they say she doesn't come.
Well, but it's one of the first reversals, maybe.
There is going to be. There's going to be. She's going to fall, and here's going to be the rise of Esther. And here's the whole thing.
Mordecai,
Watch the hidden God work in the midst of man's silliness and stupidity, and in the midst of man's thinking that he is his own God. Just watch God work through that whole situation.
I can't wait to see it. Well, and like you said, we're going to be in this at least for 2 years, so we're going to have a long time to see that. Anything else you want to tell the people? You got a conference coming up this weekend.
No, it's about 10 weeks. Yeah, 10 weeks. Conference for bivocational pastors and their wives. Pray for that. If you're Valleydale watching, please pray for that. Or even whoever you are, please pray that we're able to minister well to these bivocational pastors this Friday and Saturday. Debbie will be leading 2 sessions with the pastors' wives.
That'll be good.
So it'll be great. It'll be a great weekend. Good weekend. I hope it will be refreshing for them.
Okay. Well, if you're traveling, travel safe. Stay safe out there. We love you. Man, it's good being back in the same room.
Well, it's by the time you got back.
That's all my fault.
Joe and I have had to carry this thing.
I know. Well, she's been carrying us all for years.
There you go. There you go.
Here's the back kick.
Oh, my word. My back hurts just watching that.
I know. Well, mine hurts doing it.
Totally worth it.
It's either Sunday or Monday every morning I wake up. It's one or the other. Sunday morning.
Just super
Monday
early?
morning. Sunday or Monday.